My Ting has been around the fourth interest group longer than I have. So it is difficult to think of him not here anymore.
I've known Dr. Ting for close to 30 years. First time I met him was up in Silomar at one of the formal conferences, and he's always been a mentor for me and the rest of the fourth community.
He was oftentimes the first speaker in the morning, and it was just part of the ambiance of the day that Dr. Ting would have something novel and clever and different, and his interests were just all over the place. He would talk about fractals. He would play Bach. He would do things with microcontrollers, and he really was just a lifelong learner that was constantly picking up something new, looking at something that he hadn't looked at before, going back and revisiting something.
Okay, welcome to the Silicon Valley Fourth Interest Group meeting.
Ting, my earliest memories of Ting was his store at Fourth Day. He would miss a lot of the presentations, or his father would take over when he felt he had to go to one of them. But that was one of my favorite elements on Fourth Day.
My recollection of Dr. Ting is mostly filled with visions of me helping him feed people during various fourth days. He would man the barbecue grill, and I would basically hand him meat patties as as the people came by to grab the burgers and hot dogs and stuff.
A few years later, we had meetings at I think it was Applied Biosystems, which is where Ting worked in Foster City for a number of years. I remember those vividly, and of course all the meetings we had at Cogswell, including the barbecue lunches, and then most recently at Stanford. I was pleased to host those meetings, and maybe we can revisit perhaps having a watch session for these SVFIG meetings for the people who are local here. But he always fed us, or I remember that he oftentimes brought us tea, would serve us tea at Stanford, and that was very nice. I recall one time we had a meeting at his house, and another time at a meeting at his church or place associated with the church, which was very, very pleasant. So
the most remarkable thing I saw him do was play Mozart on a piezoelectric speaker. Amazing that he could do that. That one voice was enough so that you can recognize the tune. He was just an amazing man.
Even my latest project, the Core One, he's been very influential in it, and he reviewed it and made some suggestions that we did incorporate in the Core One.
He made Maker Faire happen. He sort of dragged us kicking and screaming to participate, and produced a lot of the material and tried to help our group doing outreach. I remember, I think it was actually at the last Maker Faire that happened in the Bay Area. There was a group of folks with the Ichigo Jam from Japan that came around and visited. They took a photo with him and posted it on their website. They were surprised that there was so much of a presence that Fourth had at Maker Faire, and they showed Dr. Ting, and the caption was the wise old man of Fourth, and that certainly was how I thought of him.
For many years, Ting was actually the program chair of the SVFIG meetings, a role that I assumed after a couple of intermediary folks. And I can tell you it ain't all that easy, and he was much better at it than I will ever be.
He's probably been the most prolific fourth builder of everyone. I mean, he's built fourth systems for almost every microprocessor, for FPGAs, and he's always been Yoda of fourth, so I'm going to sorely miss him.
There was an annual award back when FIG was in full blast called the FIGI, and I believe that Ting won several. I think he led the league.
And there was one time when I just started getting started into building my own CPUs in FPGAs, and I had expressed a desire to move to a 64-bit environment for my next generation experiments. And he asked me, well, why don't you use the P32? And I was like, well, 32 bits is kind of a dead end. You know, a lot of people are moving straight to 64 bits, and he basically said, no, what I mean is, why don't you take P32 and just widen it to 64 bits? Yeah, those were my memories. You know, Ting was always very open and actively encouraged me to take a look at the things that he's done and take it and run with it, basically. So yeah, that's my recollection.
And his material on fourth philosophy, I think possibly even before I started interacting with SVFIG, I'd come across, I think, one of the E4 documents. And every time I start a new fourth, I kind of go back to, it's actually the x86 E4 document. And for some reason, that one sort of gets me in the right mind frame of these are the pieces and sort of how you might build a thing up.
May have bought this at one of the Fourth Day stores, the fourth notebook. I'm glad I didn't have to pay license fees for any of the myriad things I purloined from the pages of the fourth notebook. But I remember I have a vivid recollection of using his simple graphics, drawing a line, drawing a circle, all of that stuff. Much easier than trying to figure it out from first principles or do it oneself. Would have been anywhere near as nice as this. Yeah, I guess he later revised his line drawing, but that was good enough for me, certainly at the time. But built up from scratch with nothing more than a thing that would draw a dot on the 512 by 512. That was the only machine dependent part of that particular package. So I miss Dr. Ting and remember all the myriad contributions he made to us.
I remember helping him carry this unbelievably heavy bell into the SVFIG meeting room in Stanford, and I can't remember exactly what the topic was, but it had something to do with.
It cast the bell.
Yeah, it had something to do with resonance, and he was how if you strike the bell one way, it makes one tone, and if you strike it another way, it makes a different tone. So that was a very fascinating presentation that he gave.
He introduced me and I think this group into ESP32, and I think that's been, and actually before that, ESP8266, and that's born, I think, all kinds of interesting results in terms of our contact with the fourth 2020 group.
I miss not having him here at these meetings because he was such a integral part of them. So it's going to be difficult.
I like books, and so I have all of the fourth books, and I appreciate all of the books that Dr. Ting has created, and I appreciate all of the different other publications that he's made in addition to the books. I appreciate his comparison to Zen, and I also appreciate how many fourths he made for us. How many E4th implementations he made. 2 fourths for Arduino, FPGA fourths as well, which I think that's amazing.
I feel a special connection because of Dr. Ting's bringing together Zen and Forth, both of which are important in my life as well. And yes, I regret never having met Dr. Ting in person.
And I played with many of the things he's done, got into the FPGA stuff, but he's just been here. He's always been here. It's going to be we cannot replace him, but it's going to be interesting to see how we proceed without him and standing on his shoulders. Very good man. He will be sorely missed.